This is my lab for the user input buttons. So to have two buttons and then have them interact with the basically like a username, entering a username for change for like a video game. So I have like 3 letters, be able to change those with those 2 buttons. So it would be like the position button, so position 1, 2, or 3 of the amount of characters, and then this changes the physical letters. And then I have a start button for here, start, submit, and end. And then I have a just a little light indicator to let the user know that it's on and interacting with them. So I have my program here, which is my I have my LED, then its direction, then I have counters for the direction of the letter, so position 1, 2, or 3 of the 3 letters, and then the count of the letters from this list. Sorry, I forgot the touchscreen. And it'll go through like 0, that's an empty spot, 1, 2, 3, 4, and such. And then I have the default user as a list as well. And then I have my functions. My direction function would help it go through the position. So I set up the counter, so count direction equals count direction plus 1, and then I changed, just so it's easier for me to differentiate between function and main loop program. Transfer equals count direction, so if the counter equals 1, it'll print first letter so the user can know, and then it calls the position of the default user list, which is 0, which is the first letter. And then if the counter equals 2, prints second letter, calls for the second letter of the list, which is position 1, and then so on. Same thing for the third letter, position 2. And then here's my resets for the counter, and then it returns the count direction. And I have a startup message for the user interface. So it says, welcome, please enter a 3-letter username, and then it will pop up with the default letters or the list. So in my while true loop, if start button is pushed, so I have another counter in here counting the start button. So if the start button is pressed, then the LED will come up to let the user know that their interaction board is on, and then I call the startup message function, which is up here. And then if the counter equals 2, it'll print you have submitted your username as, and then whatever the person has submitted the username. I use the join function to to pretty much format the list into looking like an actual username for the interface. And then if that button's pressed the 3rd time, it'll print goodbye, and it'll wait 2 seconds before it breaks that loop for the entire while loop. So if my direction selection button is pushed, the letter count will equal 0, which is the one that changes the letter. So if this button is pushed, and I've decided to change letters with this button. If this one's pushed again, it'll count, set it to 0, so that way when it changes positions, it won't pick up for where it left off in the previous position letter. And then I have default user calling direction position, which is a function. So trying to call the default user to acknowledge the position of the default user list based off of the direction position function. So this goes back to the 1, 2, and 3. So I need it to hold that. And then I created a variable called maintain, which is the counter direction -1, and that helps me keep the counter at the correct count without it flipping around. I've had issues with that prior. And then a time sleep, which originally that was for a print, but I just left that just for my own peace of mind. And then if the letter selection button, which is this one, is pushed, then the letter counter will be the count let +1, and then the default user maintain equals the letters, and then it calls from the letter list. So this is calling for the default user, and whatever position that counter is on is going to equal whatever position the second counter is on, and it's going to replace whatever letter is currently here position with this one. So that's how I can change the letters through the list and place it into the default user list. And then I print the join, using the join function default user, so it combines everything to look nice. And then if the letter counter equals 26, it equals to 0, so that way it resets A to Z. So once it gets to Z, it goes back to A. And then forgot to delete that one, but we'll go through. Just delete that now, actually. And then we'll go through the actual circuit functionality. So I will push my start button, and it says welcome, please enter a 3-letter username. So it's already made my list nice and look good for a user interface, because this was my list previously right here. So I took out all of the commas, quotation marks, and the brackets. And then I can change the position and it'll tell me. So just press this one and it tells me it's the first letter, and then I can change that letter by pressing the next one. So I'll just spell bad. So I can change position by pressing this letter, or this button. Tells me I'm on the second letter, so each push is each count. So now I'm going to press the letter button. So it sets it to A. That's the one that I want, which is also its default because it's set it, that's the first one. I'll press it again, the third letter, and then I'll press this one again for the changing the letter D, and then I'll press the start button again to submit, and it says you've submitted your username as bad. And then when I want to get out of this, I'll press it a third time, say goodbye, and then break the loop. And that is my lab with my circuit. The two user buttons for interacting with the actual username to change it to what I want. Then a start and stop button, or start, stop, and submit button with the little light indicator.